Hey guys, going to share a little bit more information here. I'm a little bit farther along on Jerry Dean's car, and I wanted to show you rear frame rails. This part's pretty important, trying to get everything square and plumb and all that. I've just finished tacking the rear rails in this car, and I want to give you some tips and hints on how I do that. So here we go. As you can see, they're tacked in place. How I got to this point was really not very hard. I'm hoping that you can see back in the back there where my laser hits that rear cross member. In this Mustang, there was a little ledge there, like say a 90-degree angle, that I could fit that 2x2 cross member into for a rear body mount and support. So I trimmed everything up and stuck that in like that. From there I'm going to build some tabs to mount the rear of the body. I've not done that yet, but I'll show you that in a later video. Frame rails here are important. So these rails came from Checkered Racing. First time I've used them, I really like them. They fit extremely well. Didn't need to use any more tubing, anything else. They turned out great. So I'm going to tell you how I did this. The first thing I did is I stuck my rail uncut in the car on top of this cross member and on top of that cross member. I just set it in there. If you're doing this, if your car's a little bit longer than mine or whatever, you know, you may have to do some shimming or whatever to get where you need to be. But what I do is I set my level here on the rail, and then I'll shim the back up or down so that I can get that part of the rail level. I want this part level, okay? Once I get that, that determines, I'll show you back in here, how much that cut has to be or where I have to put the rear frame rail. And that's what I do first. I figure that out, okay? So I had to shim that up 1 3/8 the rail, the 2x3 rail off that 2x2 to get the front of this frame rail level where I wanted it. So that told me that I had to measure down 1 3/8 for my notch. And of course it's 2 inches deep. The next thing I did was right here. I plumbed up off the center of the rear end housing, like off the center here, up onto this rail. And that was that mark right there, okay? So then what I did is I figured out where the center of my bend was here and marked that. Measured this dimension here, and that was 6 3/8 of an inch. So that told me that this rail had to slide back against that panel 6 3/8 of an inch. So I cut that off the back and then put my notch in 1 3/8 by 2 notch in it where I could get the rail back in the car, okay? So once I got that dimension, then I took the piece, and it worked pretty well with this car, I took the piece that I cut off and I welded it back on the front. That's this piece right here, okay? I chamfered it. You always chamfer so you can get a full penetration. Welded it, and then I fish plated it. Okay? You can do it inside or out, doesn't matter, but it should have a fish plate. Then what I did is I set it back in the car level, and then this tube hung over this one a little bit. I just marked it flush with this edge right here and just cut it off in the bandsaw and slipped right in there. I did the same thing for both sides. Got both of them fit in the car, and then I determined where they had to go. From previous dimensions, I determined that I was, golly, what was it, 34 wide? Sorry for making you seasick. I determined, me and my tape measuring, that you can see where I'm at. I'm 35 3/8 right there. So what I did is I measured from that tube half that distance to my laser line. Okay? Because I'm using the laser. I'm going to see if I can show you this too. Should be pretty easy. You can hold your tape measure in there, butt into that. Oh, maybe I can't show you. Sorry for making you seasick. I can get the tape measure there and see where I think you can see that laser on there. I hope you can. Find the center there and do the same exact thing in the back. I'm going to try to show you that. I'm going to go back there. You can see, well, my laser's wiggling right now because I just wiggled the car, but I got my center line on my cross member lined up with the laser line. I made sure the back end of the car was level, the back end of the car is centered, because I mean, I've seen these things off from the factory a ½ inch in the back end, so you'll have to pull them around or twist them a little bit once you get to this point here to get that cross member level. Okay, and then I'll make my marks on each side like that and get the frame rail clamped in with my clamps, front and back. Then comes the key, the thing that I wanted to share the most with you is this plumb bob right here. I got a plumb bob hanging there out of the middle of the window opening, and my laser hits that. I put it so that my laser hits that string line. That tells me that that's right exactly in the middle of the car and the jig. Then what I do is I measure from the frame rail to that string on each side to get them standing up plumb, because when they bend these things they'll twist a little bit, and what'll happen is the top of this rail at this point will be pushed in or pushed out. So what I do is determine which side, which direction it's got to move, whether it's in or out. I'll tack the rail on the opposite side so that I can bump it around and make these rails parallel all the way through the car. That's really important at this point. So at this point I could cut a cross member and tack it in there to hold everything in place, which I probably will do once I get a little bit farther. But once I get them so I know they're parallel all the way through the car, then I'll throw tacks on four corners. I mean, you can see back here I've got 2 tacks there, and then there's on the other one over there past the clamps 2 tacks on the inside, just to hold all this, and then I'll tack it on all 4 corners up front. It looks like, if you look at it, you can see it's a tiny bit twisted, but it's like a 1/16 of an inch. It's actually not as bad as it looks, but you have to do that to get these 2x3 rails parallel all the way through the car. If you don't, I mean, I'm telling you, it makes it hard to do everything else. The tin work will be crooked in it, and you know, you just needs to be parallel. So butt it into the cross member, and when you're doing this too, you have to make doubly sure that that cross member is level from side to side. So you can, I don't know if you can see my laser hits it over there, but you can look at the laser on it, and like I say, tack it in all 4 corners and don't weld it. One other thing I want to show you is I typically keep the ladder bar bracket 2 1/4 inches from the frame rail, from there to there, so you can get your MIG welder in there, your TIG welder, and weld that stuff. You get it too close together, you know, unless you're going under the rail, but with this type of car you can't, because if you look at that ladder bar, how close it is to that frame rail, when this car squatted, the ladder bar would hit the rail. If you were running a 36-inch ladder bar where that pivot point up there was way back in there, you could get away with it. But on this type of car with this long bar, you can't. So I keep everything like 2 to 2 1/4 away so I can get in there to weld it and gusset it and all that stuff. So my next step's going to be is getting the front rails in, and that's what these jigs here will help me get the front rails in the car. They go, I do 28-inch centers inside, and you can see I've got a mark there, and I've already got the cross member pre-laid out. So that's my next step. I'm going to start cutting those rails, and I'll share all that with you. I just thought you might want to see this. Like I said, I'm trying to share this in a little bit more detail, give you guys some ideas on how I do it. I mean, there's other ways, I know that, but you know, I've been doing this for a long time, and it's how I know to do it. When I started building cars, we were using a Sawzall and a 7-inch grinder. We didn't even have 4.5-inch grinders, so I've been at this a minute, but that's where we're at. I'm hoping you can see how all this is going together. And I could have, like I said in a previous video, I could have ran the rails 28 inches all the way through this car. You know, I could have butted them there and moved the cross member back and made it easier, but I truly believe that the wider you keep the rails and all your suspension components, the more stable the car is going to be. So, like, my springs will be out farther, my shocks will be out farther. You know, the ladder bars, they have to be where they have to be, but it's just how I look at it. So, other guys may have different opinions, but that's mine. And you know how they say about opinions, they all smell. So, anywho, thanks for watching. I'll keep in touch.